The city never stops for anyone. Cars rush by, phones ring, lives intersect and disappear without warning. On a cold afternoon in the heart of the United States, a homeless man sits before a worn public piano, his thin coat barely shielding him, his shoes torn, his presence almost invisible to a world trained not to look down. Then his fingers touch the keys, and everything changes. The melody does not beg for attention. It does not shout. It flows slowly, deliberately, like a memory that refuses to stay buried. People slow their pace. Conversations fade. Something in the air tightens. Across the street, a luxury car brakes suddenly. Inside it sits a woman who owns skyscrapers, controls markets, and commands respect with a single word. A CEO who built her life on strength, silence, and absolute control. When the music reaches the second refrain, her face drains of color. Her breath falters. Her heart recognizes what her mind desperately tries to deny. That melody is not famous. It was never published. Never played in public. It was written for her, years ago, by the man she loved when life was still simple and dreams felt safe. A song born of whispered promises, shared fears, and a future they believed was unbreakable. Her hand trembles as she opens the car door. Each note pulls her closer, stripping away titles, power, and the armor she spent decades building. The man at the piano does not look like the love she lost. He looks broken, forgotten, erased by time. And yet, the way he hesitates before certain chords, the way he lets silence speak between the notes, is unmistakable. Because no stranger should know that song. No coincidence should sound like destiny. And no love that deep should ever end this way. When the final note lingers in the air, unfinished, the CEO realizes it is not just a song being played on a street corner. It is a message, a confession, a reckoning. And if she dares take one more step forward, she will not be standing before a homeless man, she will be face to face with the greatest love she ever lost, and with the truth she was never ready to face. The first note cuts through the noise of the street like a confession whispered too late. People hurry past without looking, coats buttoned tight, eyes fixed on their own lives, until the melody bends the very air around it. A homeless man sits before a worn public piano, his fingers trembling not from the cold, but from memory. The music he plays is gentle, intentional, painfully intimate, as if every key carries a name, a promise, a goodbye that was never spoken. Across the street, a black car screeches to a halt. The CEO inside, powerful enough to command boardrooms and silence entire rooms with a single glance, freezes mid-breath. Her hand tightens around her phone as the melody reaches a familiar passage. A sequence of notes she has not heard in decades, a song written for her when love was reckless and hope still innocent. Her world, built on control and distance, shatters in that instant. Because no one else should know that song. No one else should still be alive to play it. And yet, there he is, dressed in rags, playing her past in public, unraveling her present with every note. She steps out of the car without realizing she is doing it, her heels striking the asphalt like a countdown. Each step closer sharpens the impossible truth crushing her chest. The man does not look up. He never does. He plays as if the city has vanished, as if the woman standing only a few feet away does not exist. The same way he once vanished from her life, without explanation. Her throat tightens as the final notes hang in the air, unfinished, suspended between what was and what should never be found again. She knows that song was never recorded, never shared, never played for anyone else. It was written in secret, on a night soaked in dreams and fear, by the man she loved more than ambition, more than security, more than herself. Her mind screams that this is coincidence, cruelty, madness. But her heart knows better. Because the way he hesitates before the final chord is the same way he always hesitated before saying goodbye. And if that man is truly who she thinks he is, then everything she believes about loss, success, and the life she chose is about to collapse. Before continuing this story, subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any message that might touch your heart. She had not spoken a single word yet, but the silence between them was already telling an entire story. The street seemed smaller, narrower, as if the world had chosen to observe that improbable encounter from a distance. People walked by, some curious, others far too rushed to notice that two lives were on the verge of recognizing each other after years of denial. The piano, worn down by time and neglect, remained there like a fragile link between what still existed and what had been lost. The CO took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she had carried alone. Her life was made of numbers, cold decisions, and choices that never allowed room for hesitation. She had learned early on that feelings could be used against you, that loving too deeply meant losing control. So she turned every pain into strategy, every disappointment into fuel. Success was not an accident, it was a well-executed escape. Yet no achievement had ever been able to erase that specific absence, that music that still played inside her when the world finally grew quiet. The man, now standing beside the piano, avoided meeting the crowd's gaze. His eyes bore the marks of nights without shelter and days without significance. He did not see himself as a victim, only as someone who had made difficult choices and paid for them in silence. The city had never asked what brought him there, and he had never tried to explain. He had lost the right to be heard a long time ago. Still, within him, the music remained intact, like one last proof that he was not only what the world saw. The surroundings reflected the abyss between them. On one side, tall buildings, glass, concrete power. On the other, cracked sidewalks, old bags, a forgotten piano. Two extremes of the same city, united by a melody that refused to die. The loneliness they both carried had different shapes but the same root. She was surrounded by people and profoundly alone. He was alone and invisible, yet still felt too much. What bound them was not only a romantic past, but a shared pain that had never been named. A love interrupted not by lack of feeling, but by fear, circumstance, and silence. Now, facing each other without enough masks to hide what remained, both had to confront an uncomfortable truth. Some stories do not end when they are abandoned. They simply wait for the right moment to demand courage. The murmur around them began softly, almost respectfully, but soon turned into open judgment. Her presence there seemed far too absurd for that sidewalk. Some people whispered, others pointed discreetly, and it didn't take long for someone to ask out loud what a woman like her was doing in front of just another homeless man. The word "just" hurt more than any direct insult. She felt the weight of the collective gaze pushing her back into the place they expected her to occupy. Distant, untouchable, superior. The man sensed the change in the air before he even understood the reason. He was used to that kind of attention, not the curious kind but the hostile one. He knew how to recognize the moment he became a nuisance. Instinctively, he straightened his shoulders as if he could still protect himself from something, but there was no defense against contempt. A public security officer approached, his voice overly firm, explaining rules that were never explained to anyone important. He said the piano was not for him, that he was blocking circulation, that people were complaining. A lot. People simply did not want to see him there. When he tried to respond, his voice came out low, almost non-existent. He did not ask for permission. He did not beg. He simply explained that he was already leaving. The way he was ignored, interrupted, treated as if he did not have the right to finish a sentence, caused something to break inside her. The scene was too cruel precisely because it was too common. He was being expelled not only from that space, but reaffirmed as someone without value, without history, without a past. Someone laughed. Another remarked that he was just a bum playing piano. The word hung in the air like a sentence. The man lowered his head, his fingers clenching tightly, not in anger but in restraint. He had already learned that reacting only made everything worse. Each humiliation accepted was a way to survive. Each swallowed silence, an attempt to keep existing. She felt her face burn, not with shame for him but for herself. How many times had she done the same, even if in a refined way? How many cold decisions, how many doors closed to avoid risk, how many people left behind in the name of a safe life? Watching that man be treated as a nobody was like seeing the past crushed before her eyes. And for the first time in many years, the power she carried on her shoulders felt useless. The conflict was not only in the street, nor in the stairs, nor in the harsh words. It was inside her. Defending that man meant exposing something she had fought to hide. Remaining silent meant allowing him to be erased once again. As the security officer waited for him to leave for good, she realized there was no longer room for neutrality. That moment demanded a choice, and either one would carry a price too high to be ignored. She took a step forward before fear could stop her. It was not a grand or announced gesture, just a simple movement, almost timid, yet enough to interrupt the scene. Her voice came out steady, though it carried a slight tremor as she asked that they let him finish. The request did not sound like an order but like humanity. The security officer hesitated, confused by that silent inversion of power, and eventually stepped back. The man slowly lifted his eyes, surprised not by being defended, but by who was defending him. For a moment they simply looked at each other. There was no explicit recognition, no words daring to touch the past. Still, something aligned between them, as if both knew that this was territory too fragile to be crossed in haste. She moved a little closer, feeling the cold of the street and the weight of her own exposure. She said only that the music was beautiful. He responded with an almost imperceptible nod, like someone giving thanks without fully believing he deserves it. When he returned to the piano, his fingers no longer trembled. The melody began again, different, more restrained, yet charged with a new emotion. She sat on a nearby bench, ignoring the stares around her, allowing herself something she had forgotten what it felt like: to stay, to listen, to feel without calculating consequences. Each note seemed to open a space inside her that had been forcibly closed for years. For the first time in a long while, she was not thinking about schedules, outcomes, or control. She was thinking only about that sound moving through her completely. Between one pause and another, they exchanged few words. He spoke about the piano, about how that place helped him remember who he once was. She spoke about the city, about how everything seemed too loud to hear what truly matters. They did not mention names or the past, but every sentence carried more than it said. There was respect there. Care. A mutual listening that demanded no explanations. She realized she no longer saw him as someone to be protected, but as someone whole, despite everything. He, in turn, felt something he had not felt in years, not being looked at as a problem to be removed, but as a legitimate presence. That silent exchange began to transform them both. In her, the wall began to crack. In him, resignation gave way to a thread of long-forgotten dignity. When the music ceased once more, there was no thunderous applause, only a silence filled with meaning. They stood up almost at the same time. Something had changed, not the world, not yet, but inside them a truth was beginning to emerge, that neither of them needed to keep being who they had become in order to survive. Sometimes all it takes is a simple gesture to remember that transformation does not begin with grand revelations, but with the courage to remain. The silence that followed felt too heavy to be held by music alone. She felt her heart beat faster, as if something old were about to break the surface. She stepped closer, her eyes fixed on his face, searching for a detail that would confirm what she already knew but still lacked the courage to name. When he spoke again, it was not about the music. It was about the song. He said, almost in a whisper, that he had written that melody for someone he had never forgotten, that each note was a way of asking forgiveness for leaving without explaining. She stopped. The world seemed to contract around them. That sentence cut through the years like a soft, precise blade. No one else could say that in that way. The voice was different, rougher, but the cadence was the same. That request for forgiveness she had imagined so many times finally existed. There, exposed, fragile. Without realizing it, tears fell, not from pain, but from recognition. He continued, now without playing, but looking directly at her. He told her that he had disappeared because someone had to pay the price for an impossible choice. That he had received a veiled threat, a silent pressure, coming from a world too big for the two of them. He said the only way to protect her was to vanish, to let her hate him, to move on believing she had been abandoned. His talent, his career, the music, everything had been left behind that night. Not out of weakness, but out of love. Her legs nearly gave way. Everything she had built, every narrative she had used to survive, began to crumble. The abandonment had never existed as she believed. The silence had been a shield. The loss, a cruelly necessary choice. As she looked at him more closely, she noticed something time had not erased. The way he looked away when emotion became too much, the way he held his breath before saying something important. Then he said her name. Not her public name, not the one that appeared in magazines, but the one only he used when life was still simple. In that instant, the truth became impossible to deny. There was no more doubt, no more escape. The invisible man before her was the same one who had once promised an entire future in the form of music. The revelation did not bring immediate relief. It brought an abyss. Because recognizing who he was meant facing everything that had been lost, everything that could have been different, and everything that still hurt. But it also meant something neither of them had dared to imagine. Perhaps that story had not ended. Perhaps it had only waited for the most improbable moment to begin again. She remained there, breathing deeply as the city slowly returned to its indifferent rhythm. The noise of cars came back, people went on with their lives, but something essential had already changed. For the first time in many years, she did not feel the need to run away. She looked at that man, not as the world saw him, but as he truly was, and understood that the truth had always been simpler than appearances allowed her to see. She made the decision she had never had the courage to make before. She did not try to erase the past or rewrite it in haste. She simply extended her hand. A small, human gesture without grand promises. He hesitated for a moment, carrying in his eyes the fear of someone who had already lost everything, but he accepted. In that touch there was more than reconciliation. There was dignity restored, respect returned, and the chance for a new beginning built with care. They did not know exactly what the future would look like. They only knew they no longer needed to pretend to be who they were not. She understood that the success that had isolated her had no value without empathy. He realized that his story did not end on a cold sidewalk or in contemptuous glances. The love that bound them did not come from luxury, power, or appearances, but from the simplicity of recognizing each other as human, fragile, and real. On that street corner in the United States, it became clear that some songs do not exist to be forgotten, but to remind us of who we were and who we can still become. True wealth was not in what is lost or gained, but in the courage to offer a second chance, to oneself and to another. Because sometimes, love does not disappear. It simply waits to be heard again. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments that you received the message. Like the video to support the channel. Subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss new stories. Share it with someone who believes in second chances and in the power of humanity. Your interaction helps this message keep echoing.